Christian parenting.
Welcome to the Called to Love podcast, where we discuss all things adoption and foster care and dive into the practical, the clinical, and most importantly, the biblical perspectives to help you and your family thrive. I'm Summer Colbert, adopted mom, director of adoption and foster ministry, and champion for the Arkansas Baptist Children and Family Ministries. Adoption and foster care aren't just a process. They are both unique invitations to go on a journey with the Lord, where you will experience life-changing opportunities to grow in your faith and learn to love in an entirely new way. One thing is for sure, being called to love means you will never be the same.
Welcome to part 2 of Radically Changed by a Call to Love with Bethany Adkins and Summer Colbert. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, I love that. And, we've talked about this a little bit just in our previous emails and conversation before we've met today, of just that idea of everybody can do something. And we just had an episode about that it's not something that's distant, that, oh, that's somebody else is taking care of that. I mean, the need is so great and it's so overwhelming. And so why wouldn't we step into that? Even the simplest of things can make the biggest impact for, like you're saying, the days that you're laying on the fetal position and everything's crashing and burning around you, just that simple act of somebody saying, I see you, I'm praying for you, here's some food, let me wash your clothes. I mean, that is no small thing in serving. And so we don't need to be ashamed or afraid to ask for that, especially for people that say, how can I help you? Like, say the things, say the ways that you can help. So as you're sharing that story, I'm thinking back to what you said a few minutes ago about your husband saying, I don't want to get too attached.
Yeah.
So where was he in the midst of all of this, where it was like, okay, this happened. Like, they're calling us mom and dad. These are essentially like our children. And now they've been removed from us. And so at what point did he, just, I guess my question is, 'cause I'm thinking, okay, obviously he's all in because you guys are still doing this,
Yeah.
and the calling is still there. And so where did that shift happen for him, where he's like, yeah, I got way too attached, but I'm still in this thing?
Yeah, and I mean, we're still walking it now, so, the case closed, we have a new case now, and I'll go back to that a little bit.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, he did get too attached, we both did, and, we don't regret it for a second. Did our hearts
Mm.
shatter in the midst of it, and do they still some days? Yeah, absolutely. But think of, like, I don't know, just we are called to be the hands and feet of Christ and love like Christ, and just think of all the ways that the Lord's heart breaks for everything happening on this earth. And so to
Yeah.
just view it through a gospel lens, the system as a whole truly is drowning, and we
Yeah.
need more believers, because without faith aside, I don't know that we would have continued, because
Yeah.
once the kids were placed, like I said, the county failed these kids for many different reasons. And we actually have a series of our journey. It's 3 episodes because there was so much that happened. And even in that, like, we didn't share all of it because of
Yeah.
privacy. So many ways that the county point blank failed these kids.
Mm.
Um, and going back to our story, there was like that 8-week period, and even longer for the older kids, where we did get too attached, and not only to the kids, but we were attached to the mom. We were picking her up and taking her to lunch when she didn't have a place to be. We stayed connected to the biological families as much as they would allow us to, and that's so important. And so, like, did it strap us emotionally? Yes, but I don't really agree with I understand the sentiment, like, I'm gonna get too attached, but that's exactly what these kids need. And I
Mm.
believe that if we didn't fully lean into getting too attached, the story wouldn't have ended up, not that we were the saviors in any way, but because of our attachment to everybody in the story, um, flashing forward, we kept advocating, advocating, advocating. Mom had her baby, and I I believe the county tried to not place the baby with us, but because we had a good relationship with her,
Mhm.
we had her in our home. A week later, we got a call from the county that the 11-month-old, his placement failed. They asked us to take him back. I had already known that because I was connected to the biological family there. A week later, we went to go visit mom in rehab so that she could see the babies, and because we were connected with her, she had asked us to go to Cleveland to pick up the 3 older kids for the day. So we did that. During that time, they had disclosed to us things that were not safe that we reported, and
Mm,
2 of those 3 kids ended up being placed in our home that weekend. So in a matter of 3 weeks, we got the baby, the 11-month-old, the older ones came to visit with us. They stayed, so we ended up taking placement of all 4 out of 5 of her kids. And, fast forward another year, they just, all reunified with their mom because which you don't always get endings like this in foster care, but,
right.
she after she had the baby, she turned a new leaf, and she's been clean for almost a year now. So,
It's
all of
amazing.
that to say, these kids need healthy attachment, and it hurts, it does, but that attachment, impacts their biology, it impacts their families, and it impacts the, um, outcome of their stories.
Yeah, yeah, that's really important. And, we've learned through our experiences as well that, you don't deny them attachment to protect yourself. You offer that attachment because the more they learn to attach, the better they'll be able to attach, just in
Mhm.
the course of their life. And so you're gifting them with a lifelong skill. And so in the grand scheme of things, our default is certainly to self-protect. We don't want to
Mhm.
feel the hurt. We don't want to feel the discomfort. We don't want to feel the shattering as you're talking about, and it's absolutely true. And so in the midst of all of that, the Lord is working on our hearts. And so I think, I operate a lot. My brain functions in kind of a 30,000-foot view sometimes. And I think that's probably the Lord keeping me sane sometimes, because it's like, look how cool this is that the Lord calls us to do something that's going to ultimately change us forever, that's going to give us the opportunity, like you said, to be the hands and feet of Christ. And then he's going to change us along the way. And in the meantime, he's moving all these pieces to put a family back together, and to see this beautiful story written where you're forever connected with this
Mm,
family,
sure.
ultimately. It doesn't look like you're saying like the storybook ending, kind of like what you're talking about, but it is a beautiful ending. And so many, and I hear this all the time, and I hear it. This is not me being critical of this, but like kind of what you're talking about, people saying, I don't want to get too attached, or that's too hard, or that's too messy, that sort of a thing. They're like, I don't want to foster. I want to skip all that. I just want to adopt. I don't want to know the mom. I don't want to know the family. I don't want any part of that. I want the kiddo. And so that was me, by the way, 10
Yeah.
plus years ago. That was totally me. I wanted all the pretty, and I didn't want any of the messy. And
Mhm.
so I'm speaking to me, a number of years ago, but maybe somebody else who's listening and they're kind of in that space and they're hearing us talk about this and they're like, there's no way I want to touch that. That just sounds too messy and too scary. No way to foster care. What do you
Mhm.
say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if God calls you to foster care, he's gonna put you there with, like, whatever way it takes. And so I have a really good friend who had the same story as you, and they had a biological daughter and then had fertility issues, and they wanted to adopt, so they got into foster care, and that was what they wanted. They wanted to adopt, and they did, but through that journey, they have become, like, the biggest advocates for foster care.
Mm,
And, I see so many fertility is a really big struggle for many families
yes.
right now,
Yes.
and I have many close to me, and I know it's such a sensitive topic. I know that it's, such a hard road to walk. I I have 3 biological kids, so I don't know it to that extent. I've had a couple
Yeah.
miscarriages, but I do have kids of my own. But I have seen stories where women just they resist it so much, foster care, even though it's like a little seed that I'm like, "Oh, I see God dangling foster care," and they're like, "Nope,
Yeah.
we're trying this, we're trying this, we're trying this," and I actually have one friend now who they're licensed, and it's taken years, but if God has a way like, if God has a plan for you to do it, he's gonna make a way. So if you feel that nudge, I would say don't resist it anymore. Even if adoption is your story, you can have a beautiful story of foster care, through adoption, and sometimes I just had this conversation with a family member of mine that's going through fertility, and they're deciding, which route do we take? I think that maybe the outcome is still adoption, and that is what the Lord has planned for you, but in the midst of that, like you said, he wants us to walk this road that is gonna grow us into this person that he intends us to be, and, sometimes I wonder, like, are we taking I don't wanna say that, I don't wanna be offensive, but I have to be careful because I can be offensive sometimes.
That's okay.
But he's, yeah, he wants us to walk this road and grow us into the person that we can be, and so in the midst of that, to think that along the way we get to help kids who need a loving home, I
Yeah.
think it's hard and scary, but, it's incredible too.
Yeah. I love that. I get what you're saying, like, as far as you don't want to be offensive, but you're like, "Wait, let's say the hard things. Let's say the real things." So,
Yeah,
safe space to do that. I love that. Um, my question is, you talked about, stepping into that community of seeing foster parents who are just actively doing the work. They're loving on these kids. They're doing the hard work, and you fell in love with the kids. You fell in love with the families and all of that. So my question is, what about the times when they're unlovable? The
mm,
behaviors are so hard that it is just really tough to love. It is really tough to keep saying yes. Um, what's a good measure of a time for you to say, okay, this is not safe anymore. It's not healthy
yeah,
for my family dynamic. Speak into that a little bit because that's the reality of unfortunately foster care and adoption. That there are times where disruption has to take place. What does that look like for you? Because I know you shared that you guys have had that experience as well. And speak into that a little bit because I don't want to just paint the rosy picture. I want to give a full scope and tell the stories of those who've experienced every facet of this calling.
yeah. Again, another, like, incredibly great question and also so complex, but I think that I mean, I'm just making this up as I go, it's nothing I have mapped out, but there's different categories of this unlovable thing that we talk about. I think sometimes one, you have this idea of a kid in your head, and maybe they come into your home and you just struggle to bond because they're not what you think, and I
Yes.
think that's one. For and I we've experienced that. Another one is blocked care which I've also experienced, after our little guy left and then we had the baby. I experienced blocked care with her even though I loved her family so incredibly much. I was
Mm,
grieving the loss, and then my heart, you almost can't help it, like, your heart
yep.
protects you,
Yeah.
um, from bonding, again, because
Right.
it's almost like your body is like, "Okay, well, we can't go through this again."
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, there's so much more, but I would say that and then your kids too. Your kids struggle because even if you love this child so much, this foster child, sometimes your kids struggle with selfishness and
Mhm.
all of these human fleshly responses. And so to all of it, it might sound so cliche, but I would just encourage you to take it to the Lord. I've had to do it in every single scenario, and also remind myself, like, how many times am I also unlovable? A lot.
Right.
Like, I'm
Yeah.
unlovable to my kids, even though they love me unconditionally. I think the two best examples is like our kids love us unconditionally, even though I do some really unlovable things,
Yeah.
and so does God. And so, I mean, my answer to a lot of things is prayer, but the power of prayer in my life over time has just it's the most powerful tool that you have. And so I would think that if you're struggling to bond or if you have a child who's unlovable, um, ask the Lord to either shift your heart or make a way for this child that you get to be part of this child's journey, but that might not necessarily be in your home. And so
Yeah.
lastly, that is something that we also experience. So after all the kids left, we ended up taking another placement, a little boy, and he was so sweet. It was probably I don't wanna say it was the wrong decision because I think God made a way for it, but
Yeah.
anyway, um, he struggled a lot, and then the 4 kids came back, so that brought all of the it was actually 8 kids, not 9 that we had in our home, but he struggled with that a lot. A lot of behaviors, he had a lot of trauma, and we were struggling with him, he was struggling with the fast pace of our family and with all of
Yeah.
these changes, and, I mean, it was just so much.
Yeah.
And, we prayed for a couple months, like, I said that prayer, like, "Lord, we're struggling so much with him. Either change our hearts and make it work or make it clear that this is not the home for him."
Yeah.
And, disruption has a really, really bad rap in the world of foster care,
Yeah.
but we disrupted, and I can truly say that I think that it was the absolute best decision for him, and we got to be part of his story even though it was for a short time. When the county called us for him, we were the 19th home they called.
Wow.
or 19th or 20th. So and he was sitting in the office. And so we got to be a safe place for him while there was nothing else. And the family that he's actually with now, wasn't licensed at the time. But once we started having the stirring to find a new home for him, they had just gotten licensed and he's still with them and it's been almost a year. So
Mm,
I think that God can make beauty even out of hard things and disruption. And while obviously we don't want to move kids around from house to house to house, if you take everything to the Lord in prayer and you truly have that heart of like, I know that you have us here, but make a way for it, I think that He works it all out for His good and for
yeah.
theirs.
Fall will be here before we know it. And as you start to think about back to school, I want to encourage you to think about how you can be praying for your kids this coming school year. It's so easy to get caught up in all of the daily tasks of parenting, right? We're getting school supplies, coordinating schedules, doing the laundry, making snacks, then making more snacks. Am I right? But as Christian parents, it's important to remember the big picture. The one thing that truly matters is teaching our kids to know, love, follow, and share Jesus. And so, because of that, I am so excited to tell you that the Christian Parenting 2024-2025 Prayer Journal is now available. It's called A Life of Faith, Knowing, Loving, Following, and Sharing Jesus, and it is a prayer journal from Christian Parenting that was created just for you. This journal will guide you in praying over your kids every week of the coming school year. Together, we will pray that our children will know Jesus as their Savior, love Him with their hearts, minds, and strength, and follow Him faithfully through their entire lives, and boldly share His good news with others. Thousands of parents use this journal every year, so join us as together we pray that our kids live a full life of faith. You can visit cpgive.org to request your school year prayer journal, A Life of Faith. Again, that's cpgive.org and request your copy of A Life of Faith today. Now let's get back to the conversation. Yeah, I agree with that. And that's what, I've shared that in our parts of our story as well with every child that we sought to adopt and, every process that we went through. It has taken me years to really reconcile and be comforted by the fact that those children were our assignment
Yeah.
and that our goal is not ultimately to be the solution for
Mhm.
kids. Right. And like you're saying, like they might be with you for a season. It might be longer term. It might mean permanency, but it might not. And so how can we shift our mindset from this idea of us being the solution for these kids and us being a part of their story and a means to share the gospel and what it looks like to be a healthy family?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think it goes back to that gospel perspective lens of like, we are tools that God uses for His ultimate glory. And so every day I my like, I have to get up in the mornings and, like, center my heart and, like, lay my flesh down because
Yeah.
I am naturally, like, I'm a selfish person. We all are. I want my alone time. I wanna do this. I want my house to be organized. I want all of these things, and I have to get up in the mornings and just sit with the Lord and be like, "Okay, whatever it is that you have for me, Lord, um, I will I will be that." And so
Yeah.
when I on the days that I do that, it's easier to have that perspective of, "This is not my story. I'm gonna hand the pen over to you, and I get to be a character in the story. I get to be a tool that you get to use, but I'm not writing this story. So I'm just gonna be obedient in whatever you have for me today and in this moment, and I'm gonna let you handle the rest." And
Yeah.
at first, that's really hard, especially for control freaks, which I'm a little bit of
Yes.
a control freak. But
Same.
yes, but as you learn that surrender, it becomes so freeing because then when you have moments of, "This child has just left my home, and I feel so powerless and broken," you also give the surrender then too when
Yeah.
you truly have no control and you get to say, "All right, Lord, even this I'm giving to you and continue to use me if you can." But yeah, at the end of the day, we are not these kids' saviors. We get to be part of the story, and so we go where he convicts us and we do the things he calls us to do, but he's the author.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that so much. And I don't know where we had this idea of, God puts this. family together, whether it's through foster care or for adoption, and then it's going to be without its bumps. You know, I mean, like we're all sinners and we're all broken, and so why wouldn't it be messy? Why wouldn't it be crazy? Why wouldn't it be chaotic? So why do we have that expectation? I'm asking that out loud because I fall into that accidentally all the time. I'm like, why? You know, I my daughter and I are both extremely strong-willed females in the house, and so of course we're gonna butt heads, and we both struggle with control and fear and anxiety. So why wouldn't we,
Right.
why would I expect it to be smooth? And so I think that's a really great point, and I love the idea of you just waking up every day and focusing that and just surrendering yourself and your day, your moments, how you serve, how you love to the Lord. I think that's just a really great reminder, something that I need to do on a more regular basis. You know, I'm like you. I'm very driven. I'm very task oriented. I'm like, what's on my to do list for today? Where does
Mhm.
everybody need to be? And if there's a slight disruption to that, I'm like, I'm not having it. And
Yeah.
so that's not how the Lord wants us to operate. And so He's really been driving home with me, like revisiting just the fruits of the Spirit and how they apply to us specifically in our calling and how we do life from the day to day. Because there is an extra measure of patience and of love that is needed and so many, just every fruit of the spirit can be applied to that. And so I think that's amazing. Tell us where you are in your story right now, because obviously your story's not done. The
Yeah.
Lord is still actively working in and through you and with your family. So where are you guys right now?
Yeah. What I love one thing I love about foster care is we all just have such unique stories and such beautiful ones. And then when you see people's stories, like there's like God put you like it's just such certainty that like, oh yeah, God created me with all of these gifts and talents because he's equipping me for this journey. So it's been really
Yeah.
cool. But in our story, we just really cool moment a couple weeks ago got to move the kiddo's mom into she's in a single moms program of a nonprofit that we have in our town, and she reunified with all of the kids on August 2nd. We got to go to court when the gavel dropped and celebrate, just like they do for adoptions, but only this was a reunification, and all of her big kids cheered. It was just such a beautiful moment.
Wow.
We get to keep her kids on Sundays while she works, so we still have a great relationship with them. They're part of our family, and
Yeah.
so while that's never how if when I got licensed, somebody came and said, "This is how it's going to end up." No adoption. The kids are gonna leave. And I would have been like, this doesn't sound fun at all. But
Yeah.
like, I truly couldn't have asked for anything better, like
Yeah.
but no better scenario. So that's good for now. There's still more to be written there. That's not the
Yeah.
end. And then we just recently took, I want to say it was July 2nd, a 3-day-old baby. And so that's what we have right now. It feels easy to have 4 kids compared to the journey we just walked through over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And we're just enjoying life with our kids, and our son's about to go to middle school and doing our podcast. And yeah, that's where we are. So always open to what God has for us. We may take another placement as things settle once school starts back, but yeah.
I love it. That's so cool. Yeah. And I love that you're just open to where the Lord is going to take you and leaning into him to help you discern what to say yes to and what is right for your family. So, as we're closing out our conversation today, I'm just so grateful for your willingness to share just your unique story and how the Lord continues to walk you through that. What would you share with our listeners as we're closing out, just as a word of encouragement? Maybe it's, a way that he has grown you, maybe a way that he has just changed your family with your biological kids in relation to this experience. Something, just leave us with a good word of encouragement as we're all walking out our own individual calls to love.
Yeah, and I just love the name of your podcast because that truly, at the end of the day, that's what it is. We are called to love. So, regardless of where you are and what you're doing, I would just encourage you to ask yourself that question like, where in my life am I loving? And where is God calling me? And I think that's a really great place to start. I think that we started the conversation with saying, our culture wants to kind of dictate what our lives look like and what the American dream looks like. And it has gotten so far of what God wants our lives to look like and what the Bible really directs our lives to look like. And so I would just challenge you, if you're married, sit down with your spouse and say, all right, where's God calling us and can we step into it? Um, it's scary and it's hard, but it is so peace-giving to live missionally, and foster care, truly, it's a mission field. It's a battlefield for your entire family, and it's such an adventure. Like, there's so much to it. It's so complicated, it's so hard, but it's also so beautiful and so fun and so refining. So, whether it's foster care or volunteering for a family, I would just encourage you to sit down and really sit on that question, like, where is God calling me and how am I being called to love?
Love that. Thank you so much. It's just been such a pleasure hearing just how the Lord is working in and through you. I want to make sure if our listeners want to hear more from you, how can they connect with you? How can they find the podcast and anything else you want to share?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram. My account is just my first and last name, Bethany Adkins, and then our podcast should be linked there, and it's called A Force to Be Reckoned With. So that's where we're spending most of our time these days.
Fantastic. I love it. Well, listeners, I know that you have been blessed by Bethany, and I certainly have as well. You've given me some really great just challenges to my own heart, and then just some practical ways just to consider how, in the day in, day out, as I'm personally walking an adoption journey, many of us on this, I cannot even think today. Oh my gosh.
You're
Many
fine.
of us who are walking that call to adoption, but then also foster care or just really seeking the Lord for what they're supposed to be doing. So I pray that you've been encouraged by that. Bethany, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Yeah, thank you.
I love to hear from listeners, and so I would love to connect with you to hear your stories and answer your questions right here on the show. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram, send me a direct message, or send me an email at the link in today's show notes. I pray you have been encouraged by today's episode to walk in faith and continue to embrace your own call to love. Until next time, blessings, sweet friends.